and welcome to a Partners in Crime tutorial. In this tutorial, you'll see the steps to making an epic slash effect in Blender. So we're going to be using a combination of shaders, 3D objects, compositor nodes, and passes in Blender to create a cool slash. So this is what you should get when you're finished with this tutorial, and now let's get right to it. The first thing you want to do is delete the default cube by typing X on your keyboard and then clicking delete. Next, you want to go into front view by pressing numpad 1 on your keyboard. Next, bring the camera into front view by typing Control and then Alt and then numpad 0 on your keyboard. And now that we have our camera in front view, let's add our text. So go to the top left of the screen, select the Create tab, scroll down, and click Text. So now that we have our text object added to our scene, let's rotate it so that it's facing us. So type R and then X and then type 90 on your keyboard. And then press enter to confirm the rotation. Next, we're going to center our text on the screen here. So go into the right of the screen here and select the text object data tab. Scroll down, and under paragraph and the line, select center. So this should put our text in the center of the screen here. So now we're just going to pull down our text a little. So left click on this blue arrow and pull the text object down and let go of left click. Now we're going to add some custom text. So press tab to go into text edit mode, erase the text, and type your own custom text. So I'm just going to type text slash. So press tab to exit text edit mode once you're finished. And now we're going to open a font we have stored on our computer that we will include the download link for in the description of this video. So just select this folder here and just direct Blender to wherever you've downloaded the font on your computer. So for this tutorial, we'll use the Akashi font. So select that and then click open font. So now we've got our font loaded in. Let's size our text object up a bit to make it a little bigger. So S on your keyboard and then move your cursor out. Left click to confirm the sizing. Now just left click on this blue arrow here and pull the text object down here. Just adjust the position of the text. Okay, so now let's add some 3D depth to our text object. So go into the right of the screen and click this box here, the bevel depth box. And let's type 0.02 to put the bevel depth up to 0.02. And that should give our text a nice 3D bevel. So now that we've got our text object basically set up, let's add in a material for it. We're going to append a material for it from another blend file. But before we do that, we're going to change the render engine from Blender Render to Cycles Render at the top of the screen. So go to the top of the screen and select Blender Render here. And then select Cycles Render. And now we'll append that material. And we'll include a link for the Blender material file in the description. So you just want to direct Blender to that file after clicking File and Append at the top left here. Exhibition Final. We want to go to the materials and just box select over metals 1 and 2 by left clicking, holding, and just dragging that box there. And then click Append from Library. So now that we have our metals appended, let's right click on our text object to make sure it's selected and then apply the material to our text object. So go into the right of the screen here, scroll through this menu, left click on the materials icon, and left click on the icon once more here. And you can select either metal 1 or metal 2, and we'll just select metal 1 for now. And now we're going to put a render border over our text, and then we'll see how our text looks once it's rendered. So Shift B to bring this up, and then just left click and bring a box over our text And then let's go into render view. So select this icon here and click rendered. So you can see we're going to have to change our background color and then adjust the lighting for our text. So let's go into the world settings. So that'll be this menu here at the right of the screen. Click this box and pull this dot down to black. And now you can see we need to adjust the lighting on our text. So let's right click on this lamp here and go into the lamp object data tab. Scroll up and change the lamp type from point to sun. So just select sun and let's rotate this sun lamp. So type R on your keyboard and then type R again. Just move your cursor around until you get the desired lighting. So that's looking pretty good. So let's left click to confirm that. And let's go back into solid view now. So now that we have our text object basically set up, we can finally start making our slash effect. So let's get rid of this render border and then get to it. So type Control and then Alt and then B on your keyboard to get rid of that render border. And next we're going to add in a Bezier circle. So go into the left of the screen here and click circle, and that's just going to add us a Bezier circle. So let's rotate it on the y-axis so we can see it a little bit better here. So R and Y, just rotate it so that it's tilted like so, and left click to confirm that rotation. Now we're going to just size this up, so press S and move your cursor out. Left click to confirm the sizing. We're going to adjust the rotation a little bit more, so RY, left click to confirm that, and type R twice on your keyboard and rotate it like so. So that looks pretty good. Left click to confirm that. So let's use our middle mouse button to pan around. So basically, to create our slash, we're going to add a 3D object that's just going to follow the circle to slash across the front of the text here. So we don't really need the back portions of the circle. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete them. But first, we need to convert our curve object to a mesh object. So Alt-C to bring up this menu here, and then select Mesh from Curve Meta Surf Text. So now that that's been converted, we can press Tab to go into edit mode. You can see all the vertices of this circle. So if we press C on our keyboard, it should bring up circle select. And if you use your scroll wheel to scroll down or up, you can zoom up and down there. So just adjust the size of your circle select and select these back vertices. Left click and just hold and select all these. Right click to cancel the circle select, and X to bring up this dialog. And once this dialog is brought up, just select vertices. So let's press Tab to go back into solid mode, and numpad 0, go into camera view. So that's looking pretty good. So once we add the 3D object in the future, we're going to make it kind of curve around the text, starting from this point and just slash across and go down and then up here. So let's use the middle mouse button to pan around. Okay, numpad 0. Let's duplicate this object here. So Shift D, right click to cancel that movement, and type RY so that we get a second slash around our text object. And left click to confirm that. So it looks pretty good. So we're going to have one of our objects follow this way, and we're going to make another object that follows this way, goes around up here. So let's add in our slash object. So type Shift A on your keyboard, and once this dialog pops up, hover your cursor over the mesh section and select UV sphere. Now we're going to add a modifier to the sphere that's going to make it follow our edited circles. So let's go into the modifiers tab to the right of the screen here. Click Add Modifier and click Curve. So if we click this box here, none of our edited circles show up because we have to convert the circles back to curve objects. Because right now we had converted them to mesh objects in order to delete the vertices. But now we're going to have to convert them back to curve objects. So let's click down here to cancel that menu. Right click on one of our curve objects, hold down Shift and right click on another one of our beziers, and Alt C to bring up this menu. And once the convert to dialog pops up, just select curve from mesh text. And that should convert both of these back to curves. So now if we right click on our sphere and click this section here, we've got our Bezier circles showing up. So let's select the first one. And if we type GX on our keyboard and move our cursor out, our sphere should follow our curve. So let's see what happens. So type G and then X on your keyboard. You can see it's kind of rotating down there at an awkward angle. It's just curving in a way we don't really want it to curve. So let's right click to cancel that. And the reason it's curving like that is because we have to reset the rotation to default for our curves. So if you right click on one of the curves and go into object view, you can see that the rotation values are all different. And basically our UV sphere thinks that it's supposed to follow that kind of rotation off into 3D space. So what we need to do is we need to right click back on this curve. We need to make Blender think that this curve is at its default rotation. So to do that, we're just going to type Control A and basically select rotation. And now you can see all values are at 0 and Blender believes this is the default rotation for this object. So now if we right click on the sphere and type G and then X, our sphere is following it nicely. So now that we have our sphere going across here, let's make our sphere look more like a slash. So right click to cancel the movement and adjust the Y and Z scaling values to make our sphere a little bit thinner. So click the Y box and change the value to 0.03, and the Z box, click that and change the value to 0.02. And now we have a nice looking thin slash. So if we type GX, move it across here, looks pretty nice. So right click to cancel that. Let's add in a modifier that makes this look a little bit more like a slash. So let's go into the modifier section and click add modifier and select array. And you can see we have a pretty good looking slash effect there. So let's copy this array modifier. So hit copy, scroll down. Let's change the offset on this second one, the X offset. So just click this here and just pull it back. So negative 0.5 is good. So we've got our curve modifier and then our two array modifiers afterwards. So let's GX and move this across and see how it looks. So GX, and we have a nice slash effect there. Okay, so let's right click to cancel that movement there. And let's make another slash that follows from here to around here. So Shift D to duplicate this, right click to cancel the movement, and just scroll up, and in the curve modifier you can just change the object to Bezier circle 001. And we're going to have to do the same Control A fix for this Bezier circle. So right click on this, type Control A on your keyboard, and click rotation. So now we've got it at the default rotation. So right click on this and GX. Okay, so it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to GX it across here and leave it here. So left click to confirm that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add an emissive material to these slashes. Okay, so let's go into the material section, add a new material, and we're going to make the material an emission material. So we'll click diffuse here and click emission, and we're going to change the emission strength to 5, and we're going to name this material, click that box there, we're going to name it slash material. We're going to right click on our slash here and click the material icon and select slash material so it also has the same material. Now what we're going to do is we're going to animate our slashes. So on frame 1, we're going to make this the location for our slash here. So type I on your keyboard, and when the insert keyframe menu dialog pops up, just select location. And then right click on the other slash and do the same for that. I and then location. Next we're going to jump to a later frame in our scene. So let's go with frame 32. We're going to make this come across here and up here. So GX, just move that across there. And right there, so left click, then type I on your keyboard and select location, and right click on our other slash, and we'll insert a keyframe for this as well once we move it across. So GX, move it across here and up there, and left click, and then type I on your keyboard, and when the insert keyframe menu dialog pops up, just click location. So now if we rewind this and play it, our slashes just come across there, and it's a pretty neat effect. Okay, so let's hit pause and rewind. So our emission material should make our slashes much brighter than our text object is. So let's take a look at that. Shift B to put up a render border. Just left click and drag it across here. Let's go into rendered view. Okay, so that is looking pretty good. Now, after a certain frame, we want these slashes to disappear, because we don't just want them lingering in the background for the duration of our animation, which is all the frames after the frames that they're animated. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some transparency into the material with the emission material, and we're going to keyframe it. So let's go back into solid view. Let's pull out another window here. So at the bottom left, just click this and pull it out. And let's go into the node editor. So I'm going to pull that in there so you can see more. Scroll up to zoom in. Middle mouse button to pan around. So let's click add shader, mix shader. Look it up after the emission shader. Scroll down to zoom out. Middle mouse button to pan around, and let's click add shader transparent, and let's hook the output of our transparent to the bottom input of the mix shader. Okay, and basically if we set the mix shader to a value of 1, our material will be completely transparent, but if we set it to a value of 0, that means it will not factor in the transparency at all, and it will just be emissive. So let's jump to earlier frame in our animation, and let's see when the slashes really start to move. So we'll go with frame 3, and frame 3 is when there will be no transparency in our slashes. So hover your cursor over that and type I. So make sure that the mixed value is keyframed at 0 for frame 3. Okay, and jump to frame 2 and make the factor 1. So that means that this frame our slashes won't appear. So hover your cursor over that and type I. So at frame 3 our slashes are going to show up and just come across there. So we're also going to make them not linger around for the duration of the animation. So let's jump to the frame where they about stop, and guess that would be around frame 31. Okay, so let's jump back to frame, well, let's see. Yeah, so we'll stick with frame 31. So enter 31 there, and we're going to make the factor value 1 for the transparency. So hover your cursor over that and type I. So right now, if we leave it keyframed as is, our material is going to like slowly go transparent as the slashes come across, and we don't want that. We want it to suddenly become transparent after the slashes have finished coming across the screen. So we're going to jump to the frame just before the keyframe we added, which would be frame 30, and we're going to make the mix factor 0 for the transparency. So hover your cursor over that box there and type I, and now our slashes should suddenly appear to the renderer at frame 3 and then disappear after the slash out at around frame 31. So now that we have our animation and our keyframes, for now, we're gonna adjust the render passes. So let's go into the render layers here. Now we want Blender to kind of record the speed of our slashes and factor them in the compositor. To do that, we're gonna have to use a speed or vector pass in Blender. So if you select passes here and check vector, we should get a vector pass that shows up in the render layers node in the compositor, which you should see in a short while. And we're also going to make an emission pass, and basically this is going to help us render our emitting materials separately from our text object. So check emission, and we're going to add a few more keyframes before we go into the compositor. So if we play through this animation, we'll have the slashes just coming across the screen, but we don't want the text object to show before the slashes come in the middle. So we're going to have to add some keyframe transparency for the text as well. So if we right click on this text object, pay attention to the left side of the screen here, scroll down to zoom out and use your middle mouse button to pan around, scroll up to zoom in. We're just going to pull this out here, and we're basically going to add in some transparency similar to the way we added transparency in with the slashes. Okay, so let's left click on this mix shader, type Shift D on your keyboard to duplicate it, hook it up here, and click Add Shader Transparent, and just hook it up here. Okay, so you can see this node set up here. Now, we don't want our text to really show until our slashes come across near the middle of the screen. So we're going to click around on the timeline and see a point in our animation which the slashes really come across the middle of the screen. So let's go with frame 16. So frame 16 is going to be the frame that our text really shows up. So let's put the transparency factor down to 0. So click the box on the mix shader and type 0 on your keyboard and hit enter. Hover your cursor over the value and type I. Now we're going to jump to frame 15, and we're going to make the mix value 1 so that at frame 15 our text is completely transparent. So hover your cursor over this value and type I. So let's play this through, and let's render it at about this point, frame 17. So hit render and then render image. Okay, so we're going to go back into 3D view and get rid of the render border, Control Alt B. We're also going to up the samples to make our text a little less grainy. So go into the rendered settings here, scroll down, click the sampling section, change the number of render samples to 35 and hit enter. So now let's render our image and add some glow effects to our slashes and maybe even to our text. So going to the top left of the screen here, hit render and render image. And just wait for that to render. So let's jump into the compositor now that our image is finished rendering. So go into the top of the screen here and click this section and hit compositing and check use nodes and check backdrop and click add output viewer. Now for now we're just going to work on compositing the slashes and giving them some nice glow effects. So we're going to pull out the emit paths of this and hook it to the viewer. Okay, so now only our slashes are showing up. Now we want to add the speed of them to the emission paths. So let's click add filter vector blur and hook it up here. Scroll down and zoom out and use the middle mouse button to pan around. And hook the speed output of the render layers node to the speed input of the vector blur node. And then hook the Z output of the render layers node to the input of the vector blur node. And now you can see we've got kind of a nice speed blur there. I'm going to put the blur up to 8 so that the slashes just come across the screen. So put the blur value up to 8. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Let's use the middle mouse button to pan around and just organize our nodes a little bit. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add some glow effects. So type, let's see, so click here and click add filter glare, hook it up after the vector blur node and change the glare type from streaks to fog glow and change the quality from medium to high. Scroll up to zoom in there and let's pull the threshold down to 0. So that's looking nice and glowy there. So we're going to shift D to duplicate this glare node and put it here so get twice the glow. Right, that's looking pretty nice. And now we're going to add in an RGB curves node to adjust the color of these slashes. So let's click add color RGB curves, hook it up here, and let's go into the red levels and lower the red curve, and go into the blue levels and heighten the blue levels. Let's wait for this to composite. So that looks pretty good. We've got a nice blue slash blur. We're going to add a few more effects to this and then we're going to get to work on our text effects. So let's add in an add node. So click add color mix and we'll hook the add node up around here right after the fog glow nodes and change it from mix to add. We're going to hook the, let's see, the vector blur output into the top input of the add node. And now we're going to add in a blur node to give this a little bit more of a blur. So click add filter blur, hook this up after the vector blur node and change the blur type from, scroll up to zoom in here, from Gaussian to fast Gaussian. We'll change the blur to a low value so that you can see the effect but not too much of it, like we'll go 1 on the X and Y values. Scroll down to zoom out and use the middle mouse button to pan around. So now you can see we've got a little bit more blur. We're going to add in a little bit more blur by using a directional blur node. So let's use the middle mouse button to pan around here and click add filter directional blur. And let's hook this up right here after our vector blur node in the bottom input. So, and let's change the blur value. Let's go up to zoom in here let's change the zoom value on the directional blur node to something like 0.02. So 0.02. Just wait for that to composite. So that looks pretty good. So if we scroll down and zoom out, use my mouse button to pan around, you can see we've got a nice kind of slash effect now. So now that we've got that effect, we can finally add in our text to our slashes. So let's left click on this add node, type Shift D on your keyboard to duplicate it, pull it over here, and once you see the orange highlight, just click that. That'll hook that up there, and pull out the image output of the render layers node and hook it to the top input of the add node. So use the middle mouse button to pan around now. So now what we want to do is hooking the output of the image output of the render layers node to the input of the add node. It will put the whole image, including the slashes, into this input here. So what we want to do is subtract the slashes from this text. So let's click Add, Converter, Math, and hook it up here. Change it from Add to Subtract. Scroll up to zoom in, and put the emit path up to this subtract value here, and it should subtract our slashes from the text, so that our slashes are only composited in this bottom section here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make a kind of swipe across effect. Okay, so when the slashes come across, say, the middle of the screen, we're going to have kind of our text sweep in with a blue glow. And to do that, we're going to have to add some bright portions to our text in 3D view. And to do that, we're going to make a text outline. So let's jump back into 3D view. So click this section here and select default, and select this here and select 3D view. And what you want to do is type Shift D on your keyboard to duplicate this text. Right click to cancel the movement. And you want to go into the text object data tab and change the fill type from both to none. And that should make this text an outline. So if we change the offset up, you can see we got the outline coming out here in 3D view. So that looks adequate for now. So we're going to give our outline a brighter material than our normal text, but we don't want to give it an emission material because that will mix it in with the emission path that our slashes have. So what we're going to do is we're going to give our outline a glossy material, and then we're going to use a node in the compositor that's just going to use those bright glossy parts for our blue sweeping effect. So we also want our outline material to retain the transparency keyframes of our main text material. So to do that, we're going to group our transparency and mix shader in a group. So B, and just box select over the transparent and mix shader. Type Control G on your keyboard to group them, and Tab to exit that group. Left click on the node group and rename it Text Transparency. Left click on that, confirm the name there, and now we're going to delete the material off of our outline. So let's go into the material sections, just click that X, and then add a new material. And our material is going to be a glossy material, so change the surface from diffuse to glossy, and go into the left of the screen here and use your middle mouse button to pan around. Scroll down to zoom out, and I'm going to do Shift B, bring up a render border over our text so we can see how it looks, and then go into render view. So you can see our glossy material is not looking all too glossy, it's not looking too bright. So we're going to add in a divide node that's just going to bring out the brightness a little bit more. So click Add, Color, Mix RGB, and hook it up to this glossy node here, and change it from Mix to Divide, and click this box here and bring this value down. Brightness is getting brought out a little bit more. So what we're going to do now is adjust the offset on our outline a little bit more. So go into the text object data tab and pull the offset up so that we get a little bit more prominence there. Yeah, that's looking pretty good in the bright sections. So now that we have our bright text outline, we can go back into solid view and get rid of this render border. So type Control and then Alt and then B on your keyboard to get rid of that border. Scroll down to zoom out and use your middle mouse button to pan around. And now that we have the outline, we can re-render our image and then jump into the compositor. So hit F12 on your keyboard and just wait for the image to render. And now that our image has finished rendering, let's jump into the compositor to see how it looks. So click this here and select the compositor. And what you'll want to always do with your blend files is you want to make sure the last node in your node setup is hooked up to the composite node. So hook that up there. And let's pull this out. Okay, so we've got our scene rendered here, and you can see the brightness there. So now we're going to add in a luminance key that's just going to get rid of our main text and just show the highlighted, the brighter portions. So let's click Add Matte Luminance Key and hook it up after this subtract node. Middle mouse button to pan around. And hook the matte output to the top input of the add node, and let's bring the low value up a bit. Scroll up to zoom in, and you can see the low value is at 0.918. So you can see now that we have the bright portions of our text only here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add some glow effects to this. We're going to kind of make a sweeping blue blur come across the screen as our slashes come across there. So let's get started with the glow. So first you can just left click on one of these glare nodes and then type Shift D to duplicate. Hook it up after the matte output of the luminance key. Scroll up to zoom in. And we're going to Shift D to duplicate this again to make a more prominent glow. Use the middle mouse button to pan around here. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now we're going to make the glow a more bluish color. So just left click here and Shift D to copy the RGB curves node and just hook it up after the glare node here. And just scroll down to zoom out here and use the middle mouse button to pan around. So now you can see we have a little bit more bluish color on our outline. Move these nodes around here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add in a multiply node. It's just going to multiply the effect of these nodes by the value we're going to choose. So left click on this subtract node here, Shift D to duplicate it, and hook it up after the RGB curves node, and change it from a subtract to a multiply node. And it's just going to basically multiply our effects by whatever the value is here. And if the value is into 1, it's going to reduce the value. So let's 3. Just type 3 into that box there, so it multiplies our effects by 3, and hit enter. So scroll down to zoom out, middle mouse button to pan around. You can see we have a much brighter outline there. So now we're going to start making that sweep across effect. So I'm going to move this node here. What we're going to do to make that sweep across effect is we're going to use a combination of the directional blur node and a fast Gaussian blur. So let's duplicate some of the nodes we already have around here. So here's the directional blur node. Let's left click on that, type Shift D to duplicate it, and just hook it up here after our subtract node. Middle mouse button to pan around, scroll up to zoom in, and we're going to change the zoom value to, I'm going to change it to 0.2. We're going to change the distance to 0.1. You can see we have a blur kind of coming out there. So let's add in a blur node. Let's just duplicate this one here. So left click on that, hit Shift D to duplicate, and hook it up after the subtract node here. Change the blur value on the X to 30. And reduce it to 0 on the Y. And let's see how this looks. Okay, so let's hook up the fast Gaussian blur after the directional blur. Mouse button to pan around here. And we might have to add in the directional blur and the blur after the luminance key. So let's hook that up there. Pull this back. Hook this here. And hook that there. Use the middle mouse button to pan around. And now we have that nice blur effect showing up. Okay, so what we want to do now is use the middle mouse button to pan around. And this multiply node kind of gets rid of the color of what's in your, what we've adjusted with the RGB curves node. So we're going to duplicate this RGB curves node and put it after this multiply node. So Shift D to duplicate that and place it here. And just wait for that to composite. Now we've got our nice blue blur. So what we're going to do now is we're going to animate this blur. So we rewind and just click through the timeline at the bottom right here. We're going to make that blur come across at around the same time our text transparency kicks out. So scroll through here. I think we chose frame 16 for the text transparency. So use your middle mouse button to pan around and scroll out to zoom in here. So for this frame, we're going to insert a keyframe for the distance. Hover your cursor over that and type I. And for the zoom, hover your cursor over that and type I. And now we're going to jump to a later frame. We'll go with frame 27. And we're going to make the distance, click on that and type -0.1. That's just going to make it come out about the same distance to the opposite side of the screen here. So now from frame 16 to 27, it's just going to zip from here to over here. So hover your cursor over that distance value and type I. And we're going to reduce the zoom value to 0.1 so that it's going to be kind of out on once it comes out here, but it's going to come back in as it sweeps across. So hover your cursor on the zoom value and type I. Scroll down to zoom out. And basically, after a certain frame, we don't want our zoom by to show. So we're going to add a keyframe for that. But before we do that, we're going to have to add in our regular text to this blur effect. So left click on this add node here. Shift D to duplicate it and hook it up just after the RGB curves node here. And hook the output of the subtract node to the top input of the add node. And pull this add node up here. And then scroll down and zoom out so you can see the full node setup. Okay, so now I'm going to scroll up to zoom in. And let's click through the timeline again here. About frame 31, we don't want that effect really added in, but we'll go back to, let's see, frame 27, and we'll make the value 0 for the add node. So at about frame 27, that's going to just go out. Yep. So hover your cursor over that and type I. We're going to jump back to frame 21 and pull this value up to 1. Hover your cursor over that and type I. So basically the slash across effect is just going to fade out from frame 21 to the later frame we keyframed. So if you use your middle mouse button to pan around, that's looking pretty good. So let's go back into default view and make sure we've placed the text transparency on our outline. So go back into default view, use your middle mouse button to pan around, and let's click add group text transparency and hook it up after this glossy node. Let's go back into 3D view now. So if we set this to render view, text transparency should be before frame 15 or 16. So let's go into render view on frame 15, and you can see we can't see any of our text objects as it should be. So we jump to a later frame, our slashes do go out. So that looks pretty good. So let's go back into solid view. We're going to change the end frame of this animation to 50. And we're going to render our animation at this frame to ensure that it looks as it should. So render image. That's looking pretty good. So just wait for this to finish. And at this point in the animation, our slashes shouldn't show up and we should have the text. So we've pretty much finished animating some key parts of our animation. So let's go back into 3D view. And if we play this through, we get a nice slash effect, but it's kind of boring. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the camera zoom out, and then we're going to make a scene fade out. So let's right click on this camera here and click along the timeline. And let's play this. So let's go with frame 27. So with the camera selected on frame 27, type I on your keyboard and click location. Then we're going to jump to a frame past the end of our scene, like frame 70. We're going to do GY and move the camera back. And left click to confirm that and type I. And once that pops up, click location. So the reason it's past the end of our scene is so that our camera still looks like it's in motion when the fade out's happening. So you rewind and just play that. So slash, zoom out. Okay. So from frame 41 to frame 48, we'll go from frame 42 to 48. We're going to make our scene fade out. So go into the compositor, use your middle mouse button to pan around and click add color, and then click alpha over and hook it up after the add node, and hook the output of the alpha over node to the input of the composite node. So we want our image to fade out to black, so we're going to pull that down to black. So basically, with a factor of 1, our image will completely mix with this black section down here, making a black fade out. So we don't want that throughout the entire animation, so we're going to keyframe this. So at frame 42, the factor will be 0. So make sure you're on frame 42. Hover your cursor over this value and type I, and then jump to frame 48, just before frame 50. Bring the factor up to 1, hover your cursor over that, and type I. And now we've made our fade out. Now before we finish this animation, let's rewind and go to the frame where the slashes come across the text to make sure that everything looks as it should. Okay, so frame 16, render image. So let's just wait for that to finish rendering. So the slash effect looks pretty good. And if you have too much blur on your slashes, you can always reduce the blur value here. But for now, that's looking pretty good. So we're pretty much finished with this tutorial. We have an in-depth tutorial on rendering on our channel, but if you want to just do a quick render, you can change the file format to XVID. You can change your encoding settings to match your media player, and if you're using audio, you can change the codec to MP3. So we're pretty much done with this tutorial, and we hope you found it helpful, and if you did, you can leave a like and a comment below, and subscribe for more tutorials. So thanks for watching, and subscribe for more tutorials from partners in coordinated rendering of ideas, motion, and effects.